Every Night is Game Night, episode 44, Pop Culture Games. Hey guys, welcome back to Every Night is Game Night. This is episode 44. With you here this week is Anthony, along with Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what's up?
All right, guys, we're going to be diving into this episode in just a minute, but before that, just wanted to remind you where you can find us. We are on Twitter at ENGN_podcast. You can also follow the @BGA podcast feed, where all this content is posted to both of those feeds. We're on Facebook. Look for Board Gamers Anonymous there. You can find us on BoardGamersAnonymous.com, where all of our show notes are posted, as well as Board Game Geek. We have a guild there, 1735. And just throwing all that out there just so you can find the content. Let us know your opinion, share your feedback, all that good stuff. The website in particular is great because you can post comments on recent reviews. We do a lot of written reviews. We post our video reviews there as well. And then, of course, if you do have an extra minute or two, we would love your feedback on iTunes or the Google Play Store or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts. Not only does it help more people find the podcast just by reviewing it, but it lets us know what you think, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, we usually say that for the end if you guys last all the way to the end, but I think we put it out there at the beginning just to, let's get some little attention and some hype for what we're doing here.
Yeah, let's see how many more solo gamers we can get into this.
Cool. So we're talking about pop culture for us geeks, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's a perfect week. ComicCon is coming up this weekend, and we figured why not look at a few games that are pulled directly from pop culture. I think a couple of these have been on our list for a long time. It was just a matter of making sure we'd all played them, but we now have all played them, so it's time to start talking about them.
Cool. So probably one of the geekiest franchises out there. Anthony's going to start us off with Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle.
Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. This one came out almost exactly 1 year ago. I was there at Gen Con. There were literally people pushing other people out of the way to get through the door to get one of the 50 copies from USAopoly of all companies. It was weird. It was like the Twilight Zone. I didn't know what was going on. But, surprisingly, it's a pretty decent deck building game. As far as a game, it is basic deck building mechanics. You start out with 10 cards. Each of those cards has some kind of effect. They have 2 different currencies: lightning bolts to attack, money to buy new cards. You're going to buy cards from a pool of 6 cards that are always out there, and you'll use those lightning bolts to attack the villains, which come out periodically throughout the game. There are dark arts cards that flip over every turn. There are villain abilities that activate every turn. You get hit a fair amount and lose a decent amount of health, but you have 10 health, and you never actually die in this game. You just kind of reset and lose, half of what you have from your hand. You really, the key is to get rid of all the villains in the deck and not let them explore all these locations or control the locations. I can't remember exactly what the thematic idea is there, but you have these little metal tokens that go on the location cards.
I think it's like influence, that their dark influence is spreading over like Hogsmeade or the little other locations that are Diagon Alley and stuff.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway,
influence, man. They're spreading their influence.
There you go. Yeah, there's some kind of thematic link. I just don't remember what it is. All I know is little metal things bad, killing villains good.
Exactly.
So thematically speaking, the artwork is all from the movies, but even with that, the graphic design I feel is pretty solid. It's got a nice board. It's got good layout. It definitely looks like Harry Potter. The cool thing here, and I'll talk about this with one of the other games we're going to talk about in a little bit, is the one book at a time. So there are 7 boxes that come in this overall game box, one for each book in the series. And you can play through and unlock one box at a time as you go. Now, if you've played any deck builders before, the game recommends you start with the first 3. I also recommend that because the first one is super simple, but it's also good if you want to go back and play that first book if you're playing with like children or somebody who's never played a game before, which this particular type of game is good for. But for all those solo gamers out there, start off with those first 3, maybe even another one after that. You start mixing the villains together over time, so that doesn't always make full thematic sense, but overall you're still building up your characters. You're going through locations that are specific to each book. As a deck builder, it's not on par with some of the bigger ones out there by design. It's not meant to be this super complicated, involved hyper version of Dominion or anything. It's just a basic entry level deck builder. I would consider it gateway level. And the whole book system, it's not a legacy system, it's not a campaign necessarily, but the whole book system where you're playing sections of a story over time, I really, really like that. I think that's really cool. Like I said, the other game I'm going to talk about here in a little bit does the same thing, and I would like to see other games do the same thing because it's such a cool idea. And this one is decently replayable because it is, a full deck builder. You're not actually just going through the story of that book and then you're done and you've solved it. You're playing the theme from that book in a deck builder. So, pros, quick, easy to play, easy to teach, good with kids, pretty smooth. In terms of solo play, there's a decent amount of tracking because you have the multiple characters you'll be playing and there's a lot going on, but it is a cooperative deck building game, so you obviously can play with just one person, and I didn't really have too much difficulty keeping track of everything. It does run a little bit long, though, because you're not necessarily planning your turns in advance. You're doing them one at a time. So once you get into like book 3, 4, 5, and you're playing by yourself, it can drag a little bit. But if you like the theme, that's no problem with that. And it's so light that I think I was watching TV at the same time. So it's not like you don't need to be like fully engaged in this thing. The cons, again, the games can run a little bit long once you get up there in the books. Can get a little bit churny in the middle because you're just trying to build your deck and be able to do things and chain some stuff together. Like any deck builder, you have plenty of turns in a row where you just have 3 money and 1 attack. Yay!
Oh. Ooh!
And then some of the player powers are better than others. Some you don't really get to use very much, and other ones you're going to use almost every time. So it kind of depends on what comes out. But overall, I found it enjoyable, if not mind-blowing. And for what it is, it was more than I expected. I'm decently excited to get to play this with my kids as they get a little bit older. I don't know how often I'm going to pull it out to play by myself. But at the same time, I'm not the world's biggest Harry Potter fan. So if you are, then you might pull it out more than I would.
I think that's going to be the message for all 3 of these games. I don't think we announced what we're going to cover. We're going to cover Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. We're going to cover Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shadows of the Past. And we're going to cover the Harry Dresden Files. So those 3 games. So I think we're going to come back to that a lot, that, maybe these games aren't the best games as mechanical experiences, but the themes, I really feel like companies have really stepped up their game mechanics wise to at least get to the point where a gamer who likes the IP can get into it. This is no different. Harry Potter, like, it's funny because the box comes in this like chest looking thing. It's the chest and whatever. It's all fun and good. But like, I didn't think much of it, but I brought it. I think people know by now I'm a therapist. I brought it to my sessions because I knew a couple of my clients were Harry Potter fans. The instant they came in, they're like, "Oh, what's that? Harry Potter? It looks cute." And they had that pop, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. And these are people that have never played any game before besides like Monopoly or Rummy. And I was able to play the first games with them, like that first book. And it's super simple. It's like deck building. It's not even 101. It's like deck building 00B that learn how to go to college class. Have you ever done that? But I love that people were able to get into the art. It's like, ooh, I'm going to buy Hagrid. I'm going to buy Dumbledore and whatever it is. So it's easy enough to get into that. So it's a super, super positive for this game. If you fall into that lane for that, then yes, I totally recommend this game. Mechanically, and I actually stealing this point from Jamie Stegmaier. He did a little video on this. I totally agree with it. Anthony mentioned that you don't really die. Like if you get reduced to 0 hit points, you get quote unquote stunned and you just kind of lose half your cards. So it hurts. You don't want to do it. And it's like, oh my God, I only have 1 health. Please heal me. So you get that tension, but it's not player elimination. They found the middle ground, which is really good for a family game. Mm-hmm. And especially a game that lasts this long. So like it can be a longer game when you get the more books. I've played book 7 and we died multiple times. It would have sucked to have player elimination. And so they found the middle way to do that, which is really, really cool. The negatives, as Anthony was saying, as a solo, I'll be honest with you, I love solo games. I like Harry Potter probably more than Anthony does. I read all the books. I was right there front of the line reading Harry Potter 6 and 7, not like busting down the doors, but like, at release parties and stuff. Watched all the movies, and I know who Monugas Fletcher is and like the kind of the minutiae of it. So I'm into it, but I sold this game. After book 4 or 5, this game gets so long and there is so much tracking. Like there's so much to keep track of. There's a phase where you do all the upkeep, and that phase gets so long as you introduce all of the different elements of the book. So like you pull a dark arts card, which is basically the negative events card, and then it triggers this person. You have to discard a card. And when you discard a card, you trigger that person, which you lose 2 hit points. And when you lose 2 hit points, everybody else loses 1 hit point. And you have to keep track of all that. And it's like, did you lose your hit point? And did you do that? And it's like, are you serious? Let's walk it back and figure out what was happening. And this was happening like almost every turn. And as you get through the game, you're playing multiple events. So you're taking so long and you haven't even gone yet. And then you get to your whatchamacallit, your turn, and the player cards that you buy, those are pretty imbalanced themselves. So like there's some that are a complete waste of time, and there's some that are so uber powerful you're going to use them every time. Okay, so this is going to sound a little bit funny, but I used to travel a lot, and I've been to like India and China, all these different countries, and I would go to a restaurant and I would, I'm curious. They have burgers. So I'm like, okay, let me buy a burger in China, see what this is. You realize that they cooked it, but they only cooked it off a picture of a burger. They didn't actually learn how to cook a burger. So it's like this weird tasting, weird thing, even though it looks the same. That's what it made me think of. Like, this looks like a deck builder, but it's like uncooked. They didn't bother designing. They just added. Like they took a basic concept and they just added without smoothing, without, balancing. And it's just, when you take all these 7 books and all you're doing is adding, you're not subtracting, you're not smoothing. It's like, you're stuck with 2.5 hours of just like, I literally had a headache by the time I finished the book 7 of this, and we didn't even win. So, want. Unfortunately, a really positive recommendation for families. I might have kept it, but in terms of like what Anthony was saying, playing this with the family and all kind of thing. But I think that there's other games that also fill that role. If my family ends up loving Harry Potter, I'll reacquire it. But beyond that first couple of games, you get into the longer parts of it. It's an uncooked burger, and it's not a tasty one. Sorry.
Yeah, I haven't gotten past, I think, 4 or 5, so I'm not at that point yet, but I can already feel it getting long. I don't think I'll play it solo at all, beyond what I've done for our discussion today. But I feel like my kids will like it, so I'm going to keep it around. I don't know how we'll do going past those books, but on the plus side, it'll be a few years before they're willing to read those, so got some time. All right, so a conditional recommendation for Harry Potter, good for families. Watch out if you're a solo player. Although with the caveat, if you don't mind a lot of tracking, and I'm a veteran Sentinels player, so I do a lot of tracking. I'm used to it. So the fact that I'm complaining about the tracking says a lot. But if you just can hammer that tracking and you're good at that, and you can keep it all in your head and you can manage 2 characters, then not bad. The theme is rich enough and there's enough wow moments to tide you over. But for most gamers, I'm not going to recommend it. Yeah. I mean, if they could get the license, it'd make a great app.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cool. So that was Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. So now we're going to shift from, this is a little bit of an older IP. This is actually an IP from my childhood. This is late 80s, early 90s is when the cartoon really blew up.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking. Oh yeah, It's funny because we're doing this episode right after doing these like difficult theme episodes. Like we're talking about slavery, we're talking about colonialism. Now we're talking about the Ninja Turtles. Woo-hoo!
Yeah,
you get the whole range of stuff here on Every Night is Game Night. We're talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Shadows of the Past. This also came out last year. It was kickstarted, I believe, either earlier 2016 or late 2015. Delivery was pretty spot on. It was designed by Kevin Wilson, which you might remember that name of Descent fame, one of the designers on that, which, whoa, okay, that sounds like a real deal there, and published by IDW. So IDW is not known for its production quality, but they really kind of did a good job here. and the fact that Kevin Wilson's on board, you're in for something pretty decent. So like Descent, this is a scenario game, an adventure game, but unlike Descent, it's not a crawler. In dungeon crawlers, you're going through and you're gearing up. You're getting a lot of items. You get your +2 sword, your +3 sword, your shield of awesomeness and whatever. You're not doing that in this game. In this game, it is a straight up brawl. So you're just going through. You're fighting bad guys. You have a scenario book that kind of lays out a very simple scenario. Most of the scenarios I encountered that they only use 2 tiles, which is pretty nice. You don't have this big sprawling thing. You just kind of lay out 2 tiles. You lay out some cars, some trash cans, and boom, there you go. And that's basically that's the whole thing. Like, you just kind of replaying different scenarios. You have different objectives. Maybe you're beating up 5 Foot Clan members, and then the next scenario you got Shredder, and Shredder's just sitting there and he escapes, and you have to chase him and da-da-da. You're doing TMNT type stuff. Solo mode. Gonna have to reserve the finger of shame for this one. I've invented a new concept, Anthony. It's the finger of shame. So this one, it has a solo mode. It's called Mouse or Panic, but it's a bunch of like animated robots that have like a very simple AI thing, Zombicide, where the zombies are kind of just automated in a simple way. But it is not included in the retail version. It is a Kickstarter exclusive. If you want to play this game solo with the Mousers, you have to have Kickstarted it with the Works version. Finger of shame. How? Okay, so the solo mode doesn't sound all that exciting. Like, it just sounds like a high score beat 'em up, like in like when you play those old school brawler games like Double Dragon. They'd have the level in between, like on the elevator, where you just like beat up a bunch of people and then you go into the real game. It sounds like that, but it's still like a whole new mode, and it's not available to people, like a whole crowd of gamers who'd love to have it. They said that they're coming out with full co-op soon and whatever, but it's been a year. We haven't really seen new content for it. Finger of shame. Boo. That is not the way to treat your gamers. So just wanted to get that out there. So it is soloable, but you have to have this extra content to do it out of the box. Anyway.
That is not cool.
Not cool at all. But I will get to other ways that you can solo that in a second. So how does that game actually play? How do you work the turtles? So you are playing 4 turtles. You have, like, no matter what the player count is, you're playing 4 turtles, and there's 1 overlord player. Every turtle has a player mat, has some basic stats, strength and speed and all that kind of stuff. You have some custom dice, and you have a can of cards with some special powers. That's it. Like I said, no fancy equipment. There's no Donatello doesn't get like a +3 staff of swirling. None of that stuff. Just a couple of special powers, and that's all you get. Every turtle will roll their special dice at the beginning of the turn. Everybody rolls it once, and then there's certain dice that you keep for yourself, and there's certain dice that you set to your right and left, and your fellow turtles can borrow them. So that's where, if you've heard reviews of this game, that's where people really, really say, oh, wow, this game kind of, not only is the turtles, it stands apart. You have this kind of half setting your own actions, but then communicating with the people about what to make available for them on their turns. So let's say somebody wants to set up a really amazing special attack on their card, and they rolled and they didn't roll any movement. They're just sitting there. It's like, darn it, I need to move. So you just, okay, you ask Donatello, here's a movement thing, and you get to borrow that, and then they can move forward and use their special attacks, which is pretty cool. Of course, Raphael is off on his own. He gets more dice, but he doesn't share, which, by the way, I didn't notice this when I was a kid so much, but I noticed it later in life. He always had a strong New York accent in a cartoons. He had a stronger New York accent than all the other turtles. Like, why is it that, like, strong New York accent means aggressive and hard to work with? It's like, this is the boor of the bunch, and he has to talk like this and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, come on, man. I didn't like that at all. Sidebar. Anyway, but the fact that he's kind of off on his own and does his own thing, but he's like kind of more powerful for it in his own way, he's represented by the fact that he has his own dice pool and he has a couple of extra ones. So that you roll your dice and you set your stuff, and that's basically what you do. The turtle goes and the overlord goes. A turtle goes, overlord. Turtle goes, overlord. The overlord gets a lot of turns, but his turns are very, very simple. He has some hand of cards. He plays 2 cards, and he does whatever the card says. That's it. Boom. And then, it just kind of goes back and forth, and then you're just, you're doing your thing. Combat is dice rolling. I mean, it's Kevin Wilson, so you're going to get dice. That's just, how it works. And it's a lot of dice. I mean, you don't do anything in this game without resolving with dice. And they're special dice. Basically, they're hit or miss, or like hit or defend. And you just have to roll more hits than your opponent rolls defends. So the tactics of the game is, okay, how can I leverage my turtle attack to generate as much dice rolling as possible so that I can make sure I hit this person, or, stuff like that. So that's basically the game. I can go into more detail, but I think I kind of covered most of it. Positives, that common pool really does work pretty well. I've heard some people complain about it. It's like, not so. It's like, you might as well just roll all at once and like everybody pick a dice. But I think the game gets it right in terms of like, okay, here's something you keep for yourself and here's something you can share. Raphael doing his own thing. There's always somebody in the group that doesn't want to participate so they can play Raphael. Great. That's pretty awesome. Don't love that you have to play all 4 turtles in solo, but they're the Ninja Turtles. Maybe they'll come out with further scenarios where it's more soloable. It's kind of a young game. I hear there is more content coming out, so I'll kind of let it slide on that. Very fast setup, only 2 game boards, pretty simple. Like Harry Potter, very easy on the entry level. You can get this with your 6, 7, 8-year-old, and you can walk them through and have a really good time for it. It's simple. You could just say, okay, here, play this one card. Play a skateboard, play a sword, play a range attack, which is a shuriken. You're done, and you can get your kids through it. Really, really, really fun. Actually, before I get to the negatives, Anthony, have you had a chance to play this?
No. I kept being on the middle because, the solo situation seemed meh. I'm not a huge dungeon crawl kind of guy, but then I heard the game was better than I expected, and it is the Ninja Turtles.
Isn't it Turtles? I mean, come on.
Yeah, like that alone should have been enough, but no, I haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, so I mean, it's as opposed to Harry Potter, where it was a game where I had it and I sold it. I might keep the Ninja Turtles around just because it's a better game, and it's a different flavor. I have a lot of dungeon crawlers, but I don't have a lot of brawls where it's just like go in, lay a bunch of stuff down, kick a lot of button, and get out. The fact that it's Ninja Turtles and also the components. That's kind of, positive and negative for me. The minis look good. They're not great, but they're good. They're distinctive. Like you can tell which ones are Donatello and which one is, Leonardo, Michelangelo, because it's very clear, the iconography, the nunchucks and everything. So that's pretty cool. My board's kind of warped a little bit. I don't know if that's a thing that I have to watch out for. Like IDW, I'm always kind of careful because their component quality isn't the best for a lot of their games.
True.
So I'm just kind of like, but in terms of grading on a curve for them, this is on the higher end for them, and it's acceptable. It's probably too simple for like a hardcore solo player. Like it's family friendly, therefore, is it going to really satisfy a solo player? The fact that everything is dice. And really, like, there's not a lot of ways to say, because in a lot of dice games, you can be like, okay, I'm going to mix piercing damage, so like damage that's automatic, and then this other part is dice, and then resistances and vulnerabilities. Like, you can really kind of strategize a lot of that, and that's where the tactics come in. In this game, it's just like, okay, how can I get 7 dice instead of 5? And that's how I can beat Shredder or beat, some of the other sub-bosses and all that kind of stuff. A gamer's gonna, if you're really practiced at some of these brawler / dungeon crawlers, you're gonna, that's kind of something to keep a watch for. If you're the overlord in this game, that is not a good situation for you to be in. Card play is simple, which actually, if you're soloing this game, you don't have Mouser. That's actually a positive because it's really easy to just play 2 cards. You can almost play cards from the top of the deck. It's like 25 card deck, and they animate the guys in some way. You can almost play cards from the top of the deck and like solo it yourself. I did that just to kind of play the game. It worked, and that's bad if you're buying the game expecting a good Overlord experience. Like the best you could say about this Overlord is that you're kind of the curator of everybody else's fun. You're a DM basically. You're not really an opponent. for the turtles, like, you know, if you win, you feel, if you as an overlord win, the turtles probably stink because you don't have a lot of tools available to you, and you kind of do something wrong. It's not like the others. The others is a game where you want to win as the overlord, and I appreciated that about that game. This game, you are kind of the curator of fun as the overlord. That's not great. Definitely a better recommendation than Harry Potter. I didn't mention there's all sorts of like stuff in the box, like comic books, and you could read, they have like little short stories, and they kind of move the lore forward a little bit. It's more like the comic books and less like the TV show, where the comic books are a little bit more kind of gritty and teenager as opposed to the cartoon, which is little kids. It's there for you if you love the Turtles. I like the Turtles. Don't love the Turtles, so I didn't really get into that stuff, but it's there for you. And if you love the IP, this is a solid purchase. So I can give a more enthusiastic recommendation for this game.
Well, I will have to check that out when my kids are old enough to care. Because it doesn't sound like I'll be playing it myself, so I can hold
it's a lot of
a
dice, my man. You might grow out, break out in hives with all those dice.
Yeah, you say that, and I'm just like, ugh.
And they're not like funky, like, the Descent dice where it's like 6 different sides. It's just 2 sides, and replicated on each side, and on purpose. Like, this is a family game. But if you love the Turtles, you might really have a lot of fun with this.
All right, cool. Well, I love the Turtles, so I just need now to make my son love the Turtles. I can get this.
Yeah, how much did you love the Turtles when you were a kid, by the way?
Oh
like,
my God.
Were you like eating banana and yogurt pizza like me?
Yeah, it was everything. My mom probably has photos of it somewhere of us dressed up. She made like homemade costumes. Ninja Turtles, they had Ninja Turtle birthday parties, watched the tapes, and we like had to hunt them down. I think it was McDonald's or Burger King they were giving them out.
VHS tapes?
Yeah, yeah. Just over and over and over again, like all 2 or 3 episodes that were on that tape.
Did you injure yourself with nunchucks?
I don't think I was allowed to have the nunchucks.
Because I remember that, like the later episodes of that first run, Mikey had to chuck the nunchucks and he used that grappling hook. I'm like, man, how many kids out there are being lame and hitting themselves in the head with nunchucks? I can't watch Mikey do nunchucks anymore.
I know. Yeah, my mom must have saw that news story because we were never allowed to have those. But, oh man, that was everything. That was everything. And I don't know. I'm tempted, but hearing that the solo's no good makes me want to wait. So that's good.
And really, finger of shame, dude. Like, come on. Like, I was so excited when I saw the Mouse of Panic thing, and I'm like, and then I saw a thread. It's like, beware, this is only in the Kickstarter version. Anyway.
Well, thanks, IDW. You saved me some money.
All right, so let's get to this. Is both of the previous ones were more kiddie franchises. This is more of an adult franchise. So let's hear about the Dresden Files.
Yeah, so this is definitely more for adults. This is not one I'll be sharing with my son or my daughter anytime soon. It's a Dresden Files cooperative card game. So this is from Evil Hat Games by Eric B. Vogel. And if you haven't heard of Evil Hat Games, it's because they mostly do RPGs. Maybe for the Fate system. They also have a Dresden Files RPG. They do have a couple of card games and board games, but not a lot. So this was kickstarted, I believe, a year and a half ago, and it did pretty well. Mm-hmm. And it is basically the card game of these different books. It's a 15-book series about Harry Dresden, who is a wizard living in modern-day Chicago, and he is for hire. He often works for the police, and he hunts down various bad guys and warlocks and necromancers or whatever is in Chicago, and everything seems to be in Chicago all the time. And it's fun. It's just a fun, quick, pulpy, easy read. And for a while there, he was releasing like 2 books a year, so you could just be reading this constantly.
The Chicago thing was like a thing in the books. Like I remember, like they'll have the meta moments where Harry's like, "Why Chicago? What's happening here?"
Yeah,
it's like we had vampires last year, we had werewolves the year before, and now we have succubi. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what happened in the 3 months in between? I was just healing, I guess. I don't know. But it's a very rich universe with a lot of cool characters. Like, it's a lot of fun to read. These days I listen to the audiobooks as James Marsters does the voice. It's the only audiobook series he does, and he does a very good job of it.
Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, yes. For those uninitiated nerds.
Yeah, I'm just going to assume if you're listening to this, you know what I'm talking about. No, it's yeah, it's Spike from Buffy. He does a great job. It's a lot of fun. Like when I read the books now, I hear his voice. But all of that aside, the card game. How does the card game take those books and create a gaming experience? The game itself is fairly simple. It's more puzzle-like. It's not a deck builder. Usually when you hear a cooperative card game or card game, you think deck builder or something like that. It's not at all. It's a set number of cards in your personal deck and a set number of cards in the deck that you're playing against. Each game you play is one of the books. You'll pick characters to match, however many players there are. If you're playing solo, you pick 3 characters. One of them has to be Harry, but otherwise you can pick from, I think the base set comes with 5, and then each of the expansions, which are just little mini decks, comes with 2 more. So there are 11 total that you can pick from. Each of the character decks itself only has, I think, like a dozen cards. So you're not going to be cycling through it a bunch. You're going to draw at the beginning, and that's pretty much all the cards you're going to play. And then there are some effects that'll give you more cards as you go along. And the book deck is also only 12 cards. So you lay all of it out at the beginning on the board, and that's it. You might move a couple around at the beginning. You can't have obstacles or advantage cards at the very end. But otherwise, that's it. That's what you're fighting. The goal is, by the end of the game, to have more case cards completed than there are foes left on the board. And so basically you'll be playing different things to put clues on different cases and to solve those cases. And there will also be ways to fight enemies. So there can't be more enemies left than you have solved cases, basically. And what you'll be doing then is playing cards. Each of them has a fate value. You have to spend fate from a pool to play your card. If you don't have enough fate, you have to discard a card to gain the amount of fate that's listed on the card. So you kind of have a push-pull where you're spending cards to get fate and then spending that fate to play another card. You have to decide which cards you're going to get rid of and which ones you're going to keep. And really, so what it comes down to is every game has a puzzle you need to solve. What order do you need to deal with the cards that are out there? How do you get the obstacles out of the way? How do you remove things in the right order so that they chain off of each other? So some foes, when you beat them, will add clues to certain cases and vice versa. Some advantages allow you to get extra cards. So you kind of have to do it in the right order and make sure that everything kind of pans out. There is a mechanic where on some of these abilities, you'll be rolling fate dice. So those are the dice with the pluses and minuses on them. And those could impact the total number that you have available, or the impact, like it might be 3 damage plus or minus the result of 2 fate die. So you could have as little as 1 damage or as much as 5, probably just 3. It seems to always even out. But that is a little bit of randomness to the game. Otherwise, it's not a whole lot of randomness. The games themselves only take about 20 or 30 minutes. They're very, very quick because, again, there's so few cards out there. And the solo play works pretty well. I mean, you're just going to lay out 6 cards from each of those 3 characters. So you just have this tableau in front of you of 24 cards because for each character, you also have a talent and a stunt that you can use. And you just play through those 18 cards, and then when you can't play anymore, you get to the final showdown, which is this. Basically, it tells you how many fate you have to spend to deal a certain amount of damage to try to finalize. Either get rid of the last cases or kill the last bad guys to meet the victory condition, which has a bit bigger of a luck component than the rest. So it might be like deal 5 damage and roll 4 fate dice, which could really mess you up. So at the end of the game, you don't get to do a ton. You need to be pretty close to beat it. And that's basically it. That's the whole game. So the base box comes with 5 of the different books, the first 5 books, and then there's 2 each in the expansion. So I think they're up to 11 total. And when I spoke to her at Origins, they said they have 1 more coming in the fall. So they'll be up to 13. So they'll have almost all the books out by the end of the year. My opinion is this. It is a lot of fun. I actually like it quite a bit. I really, really enjoy these books, so I'm not sure how much of it is that. But I like puzzly games, so there's that as well. Grain of salt for everybody. I like looking at the cards. I like trying to figure out the order in which to do them. I like trying to untangle the puzzle here. Each of the characters is very thematic. The artwork is pretty fun. The game is short enough to offset any of the kind of the luck or the randomness issues that you might come into. But there are a couple issues. I mean, there is that randomness at the end where if you are within, let's say, 2 or 3 clues of winning the game, you don't know if it's going to come out or not because you're rolling just enough fate dice to throw it one way or the other. You play the odds tend to work out, but you don't always know. So it just becomes a big dice fest in the last kind of hurrah at the end. And you're almost never going to beat the game before that because it's just so tight. You have so few cards to do it. While there is a lot of content here, you got all the 11 books if you buy the expansions, you can beat each of these, in my opinion, in 3 or 4 plays. They're not that hard because there are so few limited cards and you're going to be able to solve it. It's a puzzle. So you'll be done with the box pretty quick if you really enjoy it. 30 some odd plays sounds like a lot, but keep in mind the game is like 20 minutes. Like I sat down and played 4 or 5 in a row, maybe in a couple hours in the usual solo gaming session and got through the first 3 books pretty quickly. So once you beat one, it's not to say there's no reason to go back to it, but you kind of know the order in which to do the cards. Like, I got to get this first so that it'll trigger over to this. And I want to make sure I have these characters. There's an optimal condition to doing it. And it takes a little bit away from the replayability in that sense. So it's not as much fun to replay after you beat it because of that solvable nature. It's not like full puzzle, so you could still play it. I still, could still enjoy it. It's still fun to go back to. And after a little bit of time, probably forget some of that. But that is an issue. So it's tough. It's a really good game. If you like the Dresden Files, I think you'll really enjoy it because it is a good experience playing through each of these books. And I love that idea of playing through books. Again, I want to see this with more books turned into games because I think it's a fantastic idea. I just think they went a little too much on the shorter, quick, bite-sized side. That is kind of what these books are for people, but not that much. You don't want to oversimplify it to that degree.
Yeah, I agree with that to a certain extent. Like you can, each book is the same 12 cards, and you kind of you're doing the different order, and you have to play every game with Harry. Harry has the ability to kind of move those advantage cards and move the obstacle cards forward, which is what you need to do because you could only really affect the first 3 or 4 cards in a row. If you're stuck with an obstacle card in the back, you can't do anything about it unless Harry's there and he uses special power. So that I could see that being constrained, but I like to mix up the characters. Like I like this game. I'm going to keep this game. I'm going to buy all the expansions. Would I like this game with a different IP? I don't know. If this was Doctor Who or if this was Predator games, stuff that I'm not as attached to, I might not be into it. But the fact that it's Harry and the fact that the art is so great draws me in, and I really, really dig this game. Yeah, I will go back to it, but I think like what I'll do is, so I'm a real geek. I will play with the characters that were in those books. So like the second book, Full Moon, is when the alphas came in, which are the werewolves. I will play with the werewolves. That's just what's happening. And
you have to.
Yeah, so but like if I want to play with different characters, I could. Like if I want to introduce Molly, who at the point in the books, Molly's like 10 years old. She has no business in the second book, but whatever. If you really want to get that replayability out of it, you can kind of mix things up that way. There's also a system of side jobs. Did you play with the side jobs?
Yeah, no, I wanted to throw that in there too. I'm glad you got to it. Is you have this much larger deck of cards that you can just build a random deck with and play. They're kind of pulled from the side jobs. These are short stories, right?
Yeah, they're not based on anything. Like the side jobs are a series of short stories that appeared in like anthologies elsewhere, and they tended to be from different people's perspectives. So I would like to have seen a system where the side jobs didn't have to have Harry in them. Yeah. So because I think one of my biggest criticisms of the game, and I'm echoing Julius from One Player Podcast. They reviewed the game as well. You see the Harry cards every time. And it's like, I know Harry's the first person character in the novel, so it's thematic, but like, I don't need to see his deck every time. Like you can keep his power, but you could have had like alternate decks, alternate cards to represent Harry's kind of evolution. So at the beginning of the series, Harry's is one character, and then he gains a power, he levels up,
Yeah.
He, at a certain point, he has like this little device called Little Chicago, which is a kind of an artifact thing. I'm not going to spoil it, but that's what it is. You could have introduced a card that said Little Chicago and like really changed up his deck. And, if you're stuck with him, let's get some different, stuff. And you could have really folded in theme. So he's in every game because of the theme of Harry needs to be in every game. So you could have doubled down on the theme and said, okay, we're gonna evolve Harry's deck as the books progress. They didn't do that, which is a kind of, I feel like, a missed opportunity. That does take away from the game a little bit, kind of hits the replayability a little bit. Like everything that we've talked about, I think you do have to be attached to the IP in order to really love this game. We're playing a lot of these kind of shorter, quicker puzzly card games. Lost Expedition, Charizard came out just this year. I'm going to talk about a couple in the next episode. The Onirim is the app, and Friday just came out as an app. There's so many of these little games. Does this game compete with those game for game? I don't know. That's kind of why MMV. The IP really sets it apart for me, but it won't set it apart for everybody. So that's kind of where I am with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, it does compete with those games, but like you said, it's really hard to separate it from the IP. I had that thought while playing it, like if they took another series of books and used the same system, would it work? And I think it would. I think you could make it work with other book series. I just can't think of a lot of other book series that have kind of the same flow to them, where each story is self-contained, but they all flow together, and you have this cast of characters that grows over time. It's either more epic or less so, and it's not a universal system, I think, outside of this specific type of series. But for this specific series, it is a lot of fun. So if you like the Dresden Files in any form, you'll like the card game, I think. So
let's say that a bunch of our listeners have not listened to Dresden Files. It's pretty popular in nerd culture, but there might be a large percentage of our listeners who don't know it because there was a TV show, but it completely bombed. It was horrible. Some sci-fi knockoff before they really invested in their shows. Now sci-fi is really blowing up. Watch The Expanse. The Expanse is really good.
Yes.
I wish they turn the IP, and maybe they will because of this renaissance of geek translations. But what do you think about the Dresden Files as a property? Is this something you'd kind of recommend that people check out?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really good series of books because they're self-contained. Like you can read one book and not feel like I need to go to the next one. It has a beginning, a middle, and end. There's an arc for the character. Usually there's at least one new character introduced, usually one new power added to the main character. It's very much like
he goes to the shop game. And he buys he buys a special rod or whatever.
And it kind of follows and I'm a huge fan of like old school pulpy detective novels like Dashiell Hammett and Maltese Falcon, all that old stuff from like the 40s, 50s, 60s. And this isn't that necessarily, but it borrows from that. You have the down and out noir detective who nobody respects, but he's very intelligent, can figure a lot of things out either intellectually or with his power. And he gets his butt kicked for about 70% of the book, but in the end he figures it out and manages to solve everything. That's what these are. And it's fun, and it's just none of them are too long, none of them are too in-depth or involved, and they all just have a lot of fun elements to them. But they also hop between genres within this kind of space of magic. Like you've got, your dark magic, and then your werewolves, and then your vampires. But it all still fits within the story of Harry. So it's definitely one of those go-to like beach reads for fantasy readers, I think.
So you, without knowing it, you set me up for what I'm about to say about the book. So there's a lot of people don't know this, like, because, a lot of the geek culture can be kind of nichey. Like there's, people don't dip into the different aspects of geek culture. But in fantasy literature, which is one of the things I've really enjoyed, I've enjoyed fantasy literature longer than board games. There's a trend recently. So the Dresden Files is recommended by a group called the Sad Puppies. So do you know anything about the Sad Puppies?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So just for people who don't know, so science fiction in the last 10, 15 years has slowly kind of adopted this kind of embracing of diversity. So back in the day, and this is how Anthony set me up, back in the day, those old school detective novels or sci-fi novels, it's a white guy doing the lead. And, the females are like accessories, they're dames, they're whatever. And it was just the focus was on the action and on all that kind of stuff. And then within the last 15 years or so, you start to see like a shift towards minority characters being leads, women being leads. I mean, just this past week, the Doctor Who was announced and it was a woman. It's like, oh my God,
Finally.
the world is falling, whatever. We'll get to that in a second. So then what happened in fantasy literature is that a couple of years ago, there was a small group of writers that said, okay, I don't like where this is going. And I'm not sure where they got the puppies thing. I should know. But they kind of said, you know what, we want to harken back to those old style books. We don't want to deal with diversity. We don't want to deal with all this stuff. We think this new trend in books is just bean counting or whatever it is. So like, we're just going to take over the awards. And they politic with the board that voted for these Hugo Awards. There's yearly fantasy book awards, like the Oscars of fantasy literature. So they politic behind the scenes, and they took out a lot of those books that had the diversity stuff, and they brought in their recommended books. Unfortunately, the Dresden Files is on that list, not because of anything Jim Butcher did. Jim Butcher is, pretty young guy, and he's pretty into this stuff. But I mean, Harry's Harry. Like, Harry is an old school wizard guy. And the females in this book, while they're interesting, they're way more interesting than they are in the older versions, but they're all attractive. They, all the female kind of villains have like big bazoombas, which is slang for what, and 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 they're all tempting Harry. They're all using their sexuality, and it's like, and this was like old school stuff, so not. And so I remember I remember reading or listening to a transcript where someone actually came up to him and said, "Okay, why is this like this in your books?" And Jim Zerger's like, "They're just beautiful. I should be, they should be free to just be beautiful." And I mean, that's something that is gonna clash, like especially with as we get to lead and female leads and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not really saying that the Dresden Files is like bad or like like he intends to do this, but it's definitely kind of like, especially in the context of now, it might be a little bit jarring. So, kind of buyer beware, I suppose. If you like the sound of that old school stuff, and it is a progression, like Anthony said, of like, it's not like this 1920 stuff. It's definitely more updated. The female characters are more interesting, but there's definitely elements of that sexualized, like, pulpy, some of those elements that maybe is, we kind of wanted to move past or are in here. Maybe you like that. I don't know. I don't want to judge or anything like that, but this is something that, it's something to be aware of in the Dresden Files. Having said all that, I still enjoy the books. I will buy every book as it comes in. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoy the game. It's just something to kind of talk about.
Yeah, no, it's good to bring that up. Harry Dresden can be a patronizing character, and I've cringed more than a few times reading and or listening to it for that very reason. It's one of those things where, like, when you really enjoy something and it's well written and it's interesting, and then there's just that one element where you're like, why? Come on, just don't do that anymore.
Like another female character whose breasts are popping out of their top, and it's like, all right, we're good.
Yeah. It's like that eye-rolling description of the female form, and it is like that in many of his other books too. So, I hear that.
So, something to think about, especially in the context of maybe I'm kind of thinking about it because of this whole sad puppy thing. That was like something I really followed when it happened. And then, the whole thing on Doctor Who. We're not going to go into it. We're not going to have a big debate about it. If we do have a big debate about it, we'll invite on somebody smart like we did with Dr. Rail.
It's a good idea.
He'll help us out. We're not going to be two cis men talking about gender issues. We will definitely invite someone on to talk about this in a very smart, intelligent, non-flamey way. But we're just that it's part of the conversation now, and that's part of the Dresden Files. So I recommend them. I like them. It just has that little thing.
Cool. Yeah. So those are 3 games, pop culture wise. We got the Dresden Files cooperative card game, which I think we both really enjoy and feel like will be a good fit if you like the book series or feel like you will like the book series. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which sounds like a game that I will be picking up in 3 to 4 years, give or take.
Yeah, well, we'll see what kind of content comes out for it.
Yeah. And then the Harry Potter deck building game, which unfortunately is not as deep as it seems like it could be from the outset, but is still decent entry level for families who do not game. So there you have it, 3 pop culture games that are what they're showing is that you can turn a pop culture property into a board game and it doesn't have to be horrible anymore. So I think that's the important thing here.
Yes.
So if there's any of those other pop culture games out there, anything else that you feel like we missed or we should be talking about, let us know in all those places we mentioned at the beginning of the episode. Twitter at ENGN_podcast, Facebook, Board Gamers Anonymous, BoardGamersAnonymous.com, Board Game Geek Guild 1735. Any of those places, please let us know what you think. And if there's stuff out there we should also be checking out that does a decent job despite all of its bad work. That's going to go ahead and be everything for this week's episode. So until next time, go ahead and grab a solo game off the shelf, and let's make every night game night.
Later, everybody.